This is I Have No Title, and I'm this podcast reviews, where we review TV shows and movies. And in this episode, we're going to be reviewing the Doctor Who 60th anniversary episodes. We are your hosts, Tyler
and Chris.
So, originally wasn't planning to do this, but we have to talk about Doctor Who.
Yeah. I didn't know when, well, we kind of did know, but I didn't know how we would, because we talked about the entirety of the show to some degree several times, well, or twice at least. I think I try to slip it in as often as possible, but we always knew that there was going to be a 60th anniversary coming up at the end of the year. Then it came out that they were going to do multiple specials. Then it was going to be specifically 3, not necessarily on, it wasn't even on the day. He waited for Saturday, so it would be the 3 consecutive Saturdays after the anniversary day. So here we are. We have received all of them. 2 new doctors.
So before we get into our detailed,
okay,
what is your overall impression before we start going wild on it?
Overall, to go overall is to go wild on. Almost for me, there was a lot.
Yeah.
There's 3 hours worth of content here. For some things, that's half a season of certain modern shows. I love David Tennant. I'm still in the middle of rewatching the 12th Doctor's run, Peter Capaldi. So in so many ways, I've had this dichotomy between the two. They're my 2 favorite doctors, Peter Capaldi and David Tennant. David Tennant's the reason I got into the show and the reason I watched it. By flipping through the channels, coming across this by happenstance, stayed with it. It just seemed, and kept coming back to it. Then I eventually went and started at season 1 in 2005 and watched through Christopher Eccleston, got up to date and continued watching it and would rewatch it all the time. And eventually me and my dad went back and rewatched the entirety of the old series. Even the ones that are pasted together, that people have painstakingly pasted together and put the audio with, so you're basically watching a radio show with photographs with a few clips here and there. And some of them, they're continuingly, more and more have been reconstructed through animation, which is the best of a bad situation, because a lot of old Doctor Who episodes are completely lost, except for audio. I think we have audio for all of them, even though it's bad quality. So David Tennant coming back, it's a big deal for me. It's going to drag in a lot of people. I think viewership has been high. Ratings have been mid-dull. I don't like to use modern vernacular, but it's been middle of the road. And I've got some issues with this, as well as everybody does. I'm open to starting at the beginning and going through. Yeah. They did some interesting things. There's certain ideas I've had for a long time that either I've said they should do this again, but in a new way, or they should do some new things. And they definitely done some new things here. Where that is headed or leading, I don't know.
I'll say my impression for this could be a good jumping on point for any new fans. There are some things that you won't grasp the full scope of and weight behind it if you've not seen some older episodes. But I don't think they dwell on that so much that you can't jump in and appreciate the story going forward.
I think anybody who's in the show would want to say they want people to watch as much of the show as possible, even the old show. But I think also the higher ups at the BBC and or Disney and or just Russell might just be hoping Christmas Day is the jumping on point and saying, like, if you've never watched Doctor Who, you don't want to get settled with the baggage of any old Doctor Who, hey, good news. Season 1, episode 1, we're starting brand new thing. And is this a brand new thing? It may well be a brand new thing, and we might be getting we might have been told the very reason why this is a brand new series, I was like, was it going to be a soft reboot? This might be a reboot, which we can get into. Hopefully you've seen these, and if you haven't, I don't know what to tell you, because it's nonstop spoilers.
Yeah, I will say, again, before we get into details, for me, the first 2 episodes I thought were pretty good episodes. But at first, I was a little disappointed. Not because the quality necessarily was bad, but because I didn't feel like these were anniversary level stories.
Yeah, I felt the same.
Until the third one. then they kind of kicked it up. But you needed the other two to put things in perspective before jumping into that third one. So I kind of see why they did it that way.
The one thing, we'll go back to the first one was called the Star Beast, and we get Beep the Meep, which looked amazing. I mean, from the previews, I was like, wow, this looks on a different level from, what Doctor Who's been. And there was a little short comedy thing with Davros and the guy who played Davros, at least playing Davros again, but as a younger version before he was confined to his Dalek thingy. And the TARDIS busts through the wall and embeds in another wall, and he's the reason why they have a plunger instead of a cooler looking arm attachment. Whatever, go watch that. It's funny. Some people have really had issues with it, but that's what those children in need things are for, or whatever, Red Nose Day. So we go into the Star Beast. He has been the Doctor for a very short period of time. There's not a lot of lag. It's not like we got a cliffhanger like from when the 9th Doctor regenerated into the 10th Doctor. There was a children in need thing in between where he just talks to her, and then they end up on Christmas Day back in with Mickey and Jackie, and he jumps out of the TARDIS, and he's still wearing the 9th Doctor's clothes. There's no like off-screen adventures, even though you could make the argument there was. It was one thing to another. It's an indeterminate amount of time, but I think he does specifically reference he's been the Doctor. He's been back a very short period of time. So he's back up to his old. There's some funny scenes where he pulls the box and reveals Donna's face and puts it right back in her face. Kind of reminded me of the old Sleepy Hollow cartoon from Disney. That was a funny beat, and they go on from there. I think we get we get some shots of the new Sonic, which I was or some action from it. I was a little on the fence about it. It's an amalgamation of several Sonics put together, but seeing as in this first episode, we don't really get to see it too much in action again, but this makes him, I think, canonically the most powerful Doctor. Before this, I think the 10th Doctor was always, we agreed on that. I still have my, going through Capaldi's episodes, that's a whole different discussion. Yeah. Never mind about that right now. But he can make light constructs. He can create a screen. He can basically put like what Matt Smith used to be looking at in his little screen on it, like in between the little green piece. He would using his imagination, he was seeing a little read out there and could see things. David Tennant would listen to it like he was getting some sort of reading like into his ear that only he could hear. Like he's psychically connected with it, which is, I think, how they imply you use it. But this one actually will make a screen and force fields, which who knows what else that could be used for. So pretty powerful, pretty cool. That was pretty awesome. Those were pretty awesome scenes. The thing that worried me is this. This is an overarching view of the episode. The Meep being evil, and they have to stop him from taking off. I see what you mean. There's not, the grandeur isn't there. This is what bugs me. Russell was offered, it's been said both, that there's bad blood between him and Moffat and the BBC and everything. Even before, when they were working together, there are these two big egos that have been in the BBC. They've been showrunners. They have to work together sometimes. I don't know. I don't know them. I've seen them joke around on screen together in interviews. That's what you do when you're professional. He never once wrote for Moffat's era. And I think Moffat stated that he did ask him to, but it just never materialized. So Russell's had all this time, like what's it been, 15 years? Something like that. And the first episode back is an adaptation of a comic book that came out the year I was born. That worried me. It's cool that it was Dave Gibbons, whatever, and somebody else whose name escapes me. Apologies to them. It's easy information to come by. That worried me, especially that it was going to be the start of the 60th celebration. I know it's not the 50th. We're going to have a multi-Doctor story. There was a lot of hope held out that this was going to be a multi-Doctor story, and kind of did end up being, in a way, in the end. But no, Matt Smith, Capaldi's gone on record saying he would like to not come back just because it's just, once the Doctor's gone, he's gone, So yeah, I really think that a lot of people, I mean, I even held out hope maybe Christopher Eccleston will eventually come back. And every day that passes takes us a day further away from that being a reality. I don't think it's maybe ever going to happen unless it's in one of those little Tales from the TARDIS shorts or whatever. Yeah, so there was some, some of that manic doctor we get to see pulls out the wig, being like a barrister in England, and puts that on and has like a little mini trial there for the Meep. Dealing with the trans issue felt a little like back to school or after school special. This is a little heavy-handed. This isn't a show for, like, staunch conservatives. This is a show for free-thinking people. If you are the kind of person that doesn't like minorities, you're not going to like Doctor Who. I don't think Doctor Who needs to pander to people who are already liberal-minded. And for that matter, for anybody who doesn't know, like, the larger portion of Doctor Who has been run by a gay man. And I'm not just talking about Russell. Back in the 80s, a guy who worked his way up in the BBC and in the show, John Nathan Turner, took over at the end of, I believe it was Tom Baker's run, and then helmed the show through the end of it in 1987. He was under a lot of scrutiny from the BBC, but there you go. I mean, and that's for better or for worse. I do like a lot of those 80s shows too. I think they get a lot of flack for the special effects or whatever, but that was every show back then. And that was also the BBC. The showrunner does not control how much money they get for special effects. If a show looks bad compared to other shows, that's the company. Yeah. That's the BBC. So he kept it going as long as he could. It maintained, except for Colin Baker's costume, which they rebounded a bit with Sylvester McCoy's great costume, other than the question marks. It reached its full potential in the Doctor Who movie, where it was just red or whatever. So, yeah, I just wanted to say, like, some of this could be, it could just be written a little better. And this is, I'm judging and critiquing harshly because we're talking about Russell T Davies here. He's a master at what he does.
I guess I got a little bit different perspective because you said you're still going through the watch through.
Yeah, through Capaldi. I'm still, but...
So you've not got to Chibnall.
Not yet.
So there's several details in there that are lost to you.
I know some things that it was just impossible to not find out things about. There's some stuff about the flux, some stuff about the timeless children. There's some details in there that might sound like they are a bit of a throwaway when the doctor literally says, I don't know if you caught this, I'm 1 billion years old. And that might, like, when it sounded like the 4th Doctor could have said that, or the 7th Doctor, any doctor could have been like, I'm 1 billion years old. I don't have time to do this human stuff. But now he means it. Yeah. So that's another thing that I have an issue with the larger canon in general is like, it's not that he's too powerful. It's just that he's this ethereal being. Like he's basically like a god and too much has been revealed about him. He's meant to be a mystery, but not a puzzle. It's not something we're supposed to figure out. Nobody in the classic series hassles him about his name. He comes in, he says he's the Doctor, up to 1986, 27 years, and I can't think of one instance. There might be a few in there, but in the new series, it's a sticking point. Every time, nobody accepts it. And that's reality. That's what people would be like. But there's a lot of stopping and saying, who is he? What is he? Where does he come from? Was he a little boy at one point? Should we reach out under a bed and grab his ankle and get him to go back into his bed? Clara did that one time, I was just saying. I didn't like that either. That too much is revealed about him. Also, and this goes back to Moffat too, I think. It was never made real. It was certain things were kind of vague about Time Lords. They always refer to Time Lords as Time Lords as Time Lords. They never say Gallifreyans. They refer to the home planet as Gallifrey, meaning they would be Gallifreyan. At some point, it has been hard defined that Time Lord is an earned title. They don't refer to the rest of them as the peasant Gallifreyans. That would be a dick-headed move. They don't do that. But it's implied. What is the difference between a Time Lord and a Gallifreyan? A lot of this should have been really left vague. And Time Lord do all Gallifreyans then have the ability to regenerate? I think it's been overtly stated Time Lords regenerate. And then is that an earned thing? So if we're not going to go back and have like a spin-off Gallifrey show that's set 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago or whatever, before the Doctor is born, or technically now, if they stick with that canon, which I still think there's wiggle room to get out of, and teach us about Gallifreyan society or culture. I think there's a lot of things that need to be just left vague. And also, I'm not advocating that show. They should not do that.
I think in that second of the 3 specials, that's where Russell opened the door to fix a lot of things and give him room to go wherever he wants.
How so?
Well, it's like when I was speculating in our anniversary episode about how he's talking about certain things are fixed points, other things are not. Mm-hmm. So things are constantly changing. And even among each episode of Doctor Who, things aren't consistent because it's just like, oh yeah, this thing happened last Christmas, but everyone acting like it didn't happen. Mm-hmm. It's like at one point they knew they were aliens. The next point, everyone's like, oh my gosh, there's aliens. Why is this happening? And that's because everything he does is changing everything that's not a fixed point.
Oh, Mavity.
Yeah. And so when he did the thing on the edge of the universe, that changed everything that wasn't a fixed point. So many things can be different now. And so I think this opens up a way to not only clean the slate for any newcomers without having to go back 60 years. This is also a way to address Chibnall stuff without just being like, it didn't happen. And they further address that in this. You talked about like the sonic screwdriver being more powerful. Mm-hmm. It's a completely new one. Mm-hmm. Because whatever happened to his, I can't remember. But Jodie Whittaker's Doctor built a complete new one ground up. Mm-hmm. And as far as, all right, we're getting the spoilers now. But the 2 Doctors, the bioregeneration, that was first kind of introduced into Chibnall because the Doctor finds another person that claimed to be the Doctor and claimed to have the TARDIS. And from all the scans, yeah, it was the Doctor, but they didn't recognize each other. And that's because it was the split bioregeneration Doctor, and they had just forgotten that part going forward.
See, this is where, so I heard this, there was a commentary and like they did a podcast, and you can only get it if the people have posted it on YouTube or portions, and you could only get it from the BBC iPlayer. So it was Phil Collinson, and he was a producer on the show back when Russell was on. Russell's brought him back, and David Tennant and Russell. And Russell he's vague, he's very specific about it, but he says these are his theories. He specifically says that, like, it's your show now, man. You get to dictate whatever goes on. But he still referred to them as theories because I was like, because they're theories about the classic show, and he's not going to take a staunch retconning stance. He likes to write going forward and not retcon a lot of things. I appreciate that. But he said he likes to think they all did that. But he was like, I think that, like, Peter Davison woke up on Androzani and just flew off. But that would affect, but then what does that mean for him? Is he mortal now? What does the number of regenerations mean? If that's meaningless, if the Doctor, also I know the Doctor apparently has unlimited regenerations, and unlimited regenerations means anytime they heal somebody with their regeneration energy is optional. I'm just saying, that was another little spoiler thing I got. I don't want to know too much about Jodie's run going into it. I'm going to judge it based on what it is. But that is, again, it's making the Doctor too powerful with these godlike abilities. And we also still don't know a lot going in. He mentioned something about, like, people are more open to this because of the Spider-Verse. The thing is, there's been 2 times, to my knowledge, that the Doctor's gone to a parallel world. Once, I think it was called Inferno. It was a 3rd Doctor's story. You're running the mill, you go to the mirror universe, like in Star Trek, and everybody's got a mustache or an eye patch or something. Or if they had a mustache, they don't. But they're evil. So that was a cool episode because it was like when Star Trek would do it. That world crashes and burns, and the Doctor only barely gets out. It was an epic story. I really loved that. I really loved the 3rd Doctor's run. And then, we all know, the modern version of the Cybermen, for a long time, came from a parallel world. We only got back to our original Cybermen at some point in Moffat's run, but every Cyberman that we saw for a long time came from that parallel world, Pete's world, I think the Doctor referred to it as, where there was Ricky, which is another thing that, like, I feel like the Doctor can kind of see parallel timelines as well, because he kept referring to Mickey as Ricky, foreshadowing a season in advance that parallel world they would go to. So, no, it goes in with like my issue with Moffat making, he didn't mind killing certain characters. I like it when the moment that really got me, like Sarah Jane died. She just, at some point he said she's gone. Can you believe that? One of the most beloved characters in all of Doctor Who, because she was so beloved in the classic series, being Tom Baker's, great assistant. When she finally left, it was a big moment. And then they brought her back. And then she got her own spin-off show, which was more for kids, and it brought kids in. And she was, and it was a weird role because there were teenagers that were kind of the stars of the show, but it was her show. Being an older lady, it's weird, right? But it works because she played it so well. And she loved Doctor Who. Elizabeth Sladen loved Doctor Who. So to address that, that's great. But she did just, she got older, and I think she got cancer and died. And it's been a while since I've been up on all this gossip. But Adric, that was the only real companion that died, like on the Doctor's watch. He was young, too. He was a younger kid from it was an alien from I think even another universe that was a mathematician, and they were trying to stop the Cybermen. He happened to be on the other ship, and he blew it up, and they were just powerless to stop it. The other two companions, Nyssa and Tegan, embraced each other, leaving the Doctor just slack-jawed, watching the screen, hitting buttons on the TARDIS console. Adric is pretty well hated among Doctor Who fans, or classic Doctor Who fans. That might be extreme, but they do like to make fun of him a lot, and he's the annoying younger kid. But it worked as a foil for the Doctor, like a friendly foil, and sometimes he seemed smarter than the Doctor. And I think that's sometimes good to be able to put the Doctor in his place, if it's funny and if it works. But that's a scar that remains on there, and they've been afraid to do something that big with a close companion. He spanned 2 Doctors and was there for a fair few years, I think 2 or 3 years, maybe longer. So that was really, I think, an important moment that they mentioned that they said it to each other, the two new Doctors. The second episode was a weird one because it's just the 2 actors, through the whole thing, and they get to talk, and we get some emotion from David Tennant. Here's one of my other bigger criticisms of the specials as a whole. David Tennant is such a great actor, and he brings this intensity to the role. The 10th Doctor, especially. We have more time with him, of course. The 12th Doctor stays at a low simmer all the time. He's a little angry all the time. That's why whenever he brings out something that's impactful, it's like when he smiles or he kind of does a little dance or laughs maniacally, and you're like, whoa, that's a bit much. But David's always smiling and dancing around. So when he starts yelling or banging his hands on the wall, screaming and letting out this intense emotion, it's so much more powerful. And we got both of those moments in the trailer. And one was in the first episode, one was in the second, and we didn't really get one for the third. And I'm not saying it's a staple or that it has to be, but I felt like, of what I did like about the third and it feeling more epic than the other 2, it also felt like it was missing something. My girlfriend Allison said that the Toymaker was a big enough threat. He didn't feel big enough. It felt like that should have been the 3 specials, is getting to that. And it didn't even build to that. It was just, he's there that's the 3rd episode. That's that. Basically a god. That's it. And then, are you ready for it? They beat him with a game of hacky sack. For better or for worse, the new Doctor almost up immediately, which I think is a good Doctor moment, that he's just like, sorry, I got too into it. I was just having fun. I forgot we're playing for all of reality. And I think another thing that Russell wanted to do with that, he specifically said, I wanted to give it a happy ending this time. I didn't want the regeneration to be sad. I wanted it to be happy.
Yeah, because the last time Tennant regenerated, that was heartbreaking.
It was, and more so, I think, because I hated the ending. I hated his last line. I've not liked that. I still don't. To do this bookend, it's not even a bookend, because as everyone now knows, he didn't leave. He didn't regenerate. And that leaves a lot up in the air. When he ultimately gets killed or would have regenerated, does he turn into energy and go into Shurigawa? Does he regenerate? Does he have the regenerations? And Shuri is a separate thing that if he dies, because the Doctor can die. It's alluded to all the time. Regeneration is not a for sure thing. You can be killed and not regenerate. Something can suppress your regeneration. If you get killed mid-regeneration, there's things that can happen to kill a Time Lord unless they're effectively made immortal. And that takes away all the stakes.
Yeah.
There's a lot left up in the air for this that's not been made clear. The new Doctor has a jukebox and is going to go to raves now. I don't know if they know.
I'm looking at this a little bit more favorably, and that might be because I have finished all of Chibnall's show run of that.
Did that put you at a low point where you can only look up from there?
Yeah, so coming back in to see Russell behind the wheel again, it's like, yeah, I'm getting that feel of the old Doctor again.
Yeah.
But part of it is I have started watching the classics now. Not super far into it, but...
Are you skipping around?
No.
What'd you start with?
I started with whatever they had labeled as the first episode on Tubi with William Hartnell.
Do you remember what it was?
Dead Planet, I think.
Okay. And that's weird because back then, way back then, and I can't remember when they stopped, each serial has its own title, but each individual episode has its own title too, because they would do them at like 4 parts per story, sometimes 6 or even 10 parts per story. But each individual episode had its own title in the overarching story, so that does make some of those older ones confusing to categorize. I'd forgotten about that actually.
But looking back on what I've gone through with the classic episodes and having come off of Chibnall's run and looking back at even Russell and Moffat's run, the use of Deus Ex Machina in Doctor Who is not a new thing.
No.
So it just feels par for the course. It's like, oh, they're doing this to get out of this situation. They're doing this to change a bad storyline. It's already been there. So I'm relaxing on those points a little more. Again, with the whole thing with seeing Tennant again, I think having the memories of his original run and what he was like there is skewing the perspective here, because even though it is Tennant back and we do see glimpses of that old Doctor, he's technically not that Doctor.
Yeah, it's the 14th Doctor.
So, and as we've seen with every generation, he's slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
So this is him going back to that phase. So some of those characteristics are coming back, but he's still playing someone different. And so I've relaxed on that as well. And I agree, maybe the toy maker could have been built up a little more for new audiences, but I think that was a lot for the older audience, because they see how impactful it is that this guy has somehow managed to come back and how big of a deal that is based on how that left off.
Yeah, and we're for sure not done with that.
Yeah.
Like, that's still coming.
Yeah. And so that right there is pretty much Russell saying, hey, I've seen everything that's come before. I hear your stuff on this. This is how I'm going to change it without waving it away.
So now comes, I don't think that David is done. I think there was some weird, I don't know. I have my issues with how they approach this or how it's being handled. I had said, I think Donna needs to die. I think there needed to be some drama. I think there needed to be some, but I think he wanted to just overall have a happy ending, which is weird for Doctor Who. I don't hate it, but he's already kind of gallivanting about again. But I think Donna said no doing this with the Doctor until he's better. Is he recovering from being shot with a laser? Is it on an emotional level that he needs to recover?
I think it's the emotional level, because ever since the reboot, the Doctor has been running from what he had to do or thought he had to do to get rid of the Daleks.
From the Time War.
Right.
So given that we jump to, he doesn't find out until he's the 11th Doctor that he didn't actually do that. Even when David Tennant goes back, he will have forgotten too when he returns to his timeline.
But that's another thing too that people, at least in the discussions I've heard, seem to leave out when they talk about, oh, the Doctor only has this many regenerations. That's already been thrown out the window because no one's taken into account the War Doctor. Because the War Doctor is not the first Doctor. He is actually somewhere between the 9th and the 10th.
The 8th and 9th.
Yeah. 8th and 9th.
Yeah.
Because before that event, Gallifrey was still there. They have episodes where they went there.
All the time back in the old days.
So that means that Doctor came about either is the 8th, which I don't think is accurate, based on just a portrayal in that 50th anniversary special when you see all the Doctors coming in. So he is his own entity. So that means that he's like already messed up that regeneration count somewhere along the lines. So that has to be accounted for. So as far as what people were saying about the regenerations and that controversy, that's already been thrown in there from the get-go, from the reboot.
Which, rewatching, I recently rewatched the episode with River Song, her final appearance. And she has a picture of all the Doctors, or like a little wallet thing. And she doesn't realize that Capaldi is the Doctor. Now they said Gallifrey granted him a new set of regeneration. So he would be essentially number 1 of the new 12 or whatever, 13. And with that, he mentions to her, like, what if there's a face that you don't know? And she says he has limits, meaning that, and I think at some point, Matt Smith, when he was on Trenzalore and he got old because he was living out he couldn't regenerate anymore. That would have been his final regeneration. I think Moffat knew that he wanted to be the one to approach that. So he added the War Doctor in, slipped him in. And it was one time, it was taking advantage of a situation we never got, which was seeing Paul McGann regenerate into Christopher Eccleston. And even then you could write around that. Technically, we never saw the second Doctor regenerate into John Pertwee. We see the end of Patrick Troughton's run as he is literally just his face has turned black. You can't see his head anymore, and he's fading away into this darkness. The next time we see the Doctor, the TARDIS door opens up and John Pertwee falls out wearing what cannot be Patrick Troughton's clothes because these men, there's like a foot the difference in height and weight. And so it's clothes that are similar to what Patrick Troughton was wearing. He falls out, and then that's the last time we see him in those clothes. He's in a hospital gown for a while, and then he gets his new clothes, and he looks awesome. There's, I can't remember what they call it, season something B, where there's this, they've done this regeneration storyline where there are all these other adventures in between Patrick Troughton's last adventure and John Pertwee's first. It's pretty interesting. I've not seen too much from it. And I think they're still working on this, actually. And I think even John Pertwee might have been involved in some of this before he died. It's crazy. But it's like this amalgam Doctor. Like he's somewhere mid-regeneration, somewhere in between, and then eventually fully regenerates into John Pertwee and then goes to Earth and is a part of that's when he became the unit scientific officer or whatever. And then there's the Morbius episode, which is where Chibnall got his permission to do an infinite number of Doctors. The 4th Doctor fights this, it was a Time Lord. I think he took his brain out and became this monster, put his brain in a thing. It's one of the most ridiculous looking sci-fi monsters you'll ever see. It looks like a fishbowl with a brain with 2 big things sticking out of it. I think he's got giant claws, like lobster claws, and he's like a furry body. Ridiculous looking. But he and the Doctor have this mental battle, like Professor X and the Shadow King or something. Before they do that, he's forcing the Doctor to mentally go back, and it's one of those rare occasions. They do it fairly often now, but back then you didn't see it. I think it might have been the first time where we saw all of the Doctors, all the previous Doctors on screen. In a way, it was this kind of weird orangey red imaging. But he forced him to go back into the previous incarnation, and the previous incarnation, taking him to William Hartnell. And then they go back further than that and show a previous 4 Doctors. This is just a throwaway thing. Some people, for a long time, speculated, this is from my constant reading of the Doctor Who magazine and forums and things from years ago. A lot of people speculated the Doctor was inventing Regenerations to keep the battle going or whatever, or trick him up, because that's the sort of thing that the Fourth Doctor would do all the time. It was a throwaway line at the time. They weren't trying to change the canon. It was never addressed again. And they were just production people that they put into some Victorian clothes that looked slightly doctor-y. He kept getting, all of those had beards, which was really weird. Like, the Doctor should not have, that's another criticism. Ncuti Gatwa needs to shave. That mustache has got to go. The Doctor should not be bald or have facial hair. I'm sorry. You've got one of those two. You've got a reverse on one, and one of them, nobody knows what Tyler looks like. If you've not seen a photo, he's got really long hair, like about as long as mine ever was when I was in high school. But he's also got a beard and mustache and goatee all mixed in there. So anyway, there's a complicated history to the Doctor and Regenerations, easily. And yeah, I think if people are happy with the show, I want them to be happy with the show. I don't want to take the show away from anybody. I want it to be for everybody, except for jerks. If you're a jerk, don't watch the show, or do watch it, because it might make you be less of a jerk or more of one. I don't know. I don't know what it's done to me.
Oh, that's another thing. You mentioning them maybe being a little heavy-handed with like the trans and stuff in that first episode. Again, I got a little different perspective on that. Maybe it's because, again, just come off the Chibnall run. I feel like this is still handled much better.
Oh, than some of the writing there?
Yeah.
I mean, and looking back, in perspective, it's not like the whole episode was about that. I just wanted a little bit better writing.
No, okay. And here's, I guess, why I'm saying that it was pretty good compared to what we had. Like, did you ever watch Invader Zim?
I own them all.
All right. You know that, like, the very first episode when Dib's like, he's an alien. Mm-hmm. And he's like, no, I'm human. Look at my neck.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what Chibnall's stuff looks like. It's like, we're liberal. We're with it. Look, we got these characters.
Yeah.
And that's all. It's like, what does that have to do with anything? Nothing. So I feel like this was handled much better than his entire run. So I'm like, okay, it's still there. It's always been there.
The thing is, Chibnall wrote a lot of Torchwood, which I really liked. And in Torchwood, like, everyone is bi or gay or something. But nobody, it's never made a big deal out of. Like, I can't remember if it's the first episode or just early on, but like Owen, he's like this womanizing dickhead jerk that, like, you find out later his wife died, or his fiance. I can't remember if they were married or not, but it was his partner. They were going to get married. He was like a different man then, like completely in love. And then she died this horrible death. And then after that is when he got involved in Torchwood and became a jerk. It's just like it totally him up, and you find that out way later in the series. Watch the show, because it's actually decent. Chibnall wrote a fair amount of that show, even though Russell was the showrunner on it. But like in this one episode, he's using this pheromone perfume to get with this woman, but she's already like at a bar or something or on the street, and she just starts kissing him because you become irresistible. And then her boyfriend, or the guy she's on a date with or whatever, comes up and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And then he just sprays it again and starts kissing him too. And it's like, is he even bi or just hedonistic? I don't know. And it's never made a big deal of. It's just like, well, that happened. Yeah. And that's fine. And it's the same with Tosh. Tosh is in love with Owen, never shown to be bisexual or anything like that until she gets into a relationship with a female alien. And then they're just there, and she's like, this is weird. And that's as much as you get out of like making a big deal about something. And I'm just saying, if you want people to accept something, let it be normal. And that, I think, is what certain of these shows are for, is to have our hero take us by the hand and say, I'm okay with this. You should be too. When the Doctor yells at somebody for being racist, like, that's kind of par for the course, but at the same time, show him being accepting of all and or everything without being too heavy-handed. Also, I found out the guy from, I have not watched it yet, but I was listening to a lot of Doctor Who talk lately, And I stopped listening to this one because they were going full on into the Chibnall area, so I had to stop. But they were doing a rundown of a few of the characters. And before I stopped it, they mentioned the guy that you were talking about that has balance issues. It's technically dyspraxia. I know a guy who has dyspraxia. I don't know what his issues actually are because he's never really gotten into it. We used to be really close, and then we both got different jobs, and he was working in a different town, so we just didn't see each other. And then you know how that goes. Like a month becomes 6 months, becomes a couple of years, and you run into each other at Kroger, and you're like, oh, we should hang out. And then you just never do. I feel bad about that. But Brandon, if you're out there, I love you, bro. And what's up with your dyspraxia, bro? Like, leave us a comment. Tell us about that. Most famous person I know of, there might be another one that's more famous, but the most famous person I know of that has dyspraxia is Harry Potter. So Daniel Radcliffe. If there's freeze frames, they did a cracked video, but it was a little segment. It wasn't a full video where you can see his eyes do not blink at the same time. He winks. It's like snap, snap. And you can freeze frame like, I think the one was either the first movie or the Chamber of Secrets. And the guy's like, it's the guy who ran Cracked at the time before Cracked like collapsed in on itself. He's like, bro, you got a demon or something. Like you got that out of you. But Daniel Radcliffe would talk about like some days he can't tie his shoes. Like it's just he won't coordinate enough to be able to do that. So very niche. That's an extremely rare issue to have. Maybe Meniere's disease if they wanted to do some spread awareness. Of course, that's just mine that I would say. I don't know. I still think we're not clear and have enough awareness about actual real autism. I know everyone's autistic now because TikTok has made everyone diagnose themselves, and everyone for sure is, if not ADHD, but that's why we need more awareness about it so that you can say like, oh, I'm not, I'm just a dick. Oh, yeah. Because my boss for sure isn't. He's just a dick. So anyway, I just wanted to say, like, I found out a little bit about that. And you'd mentioned, I made fun of the guy for having his balance issues, I think, on our previous episode from a couple months ago. So I still haven't watched those episodes, but I'm interested to see because it's like, I think you said they don't really, it would be more of a thing. If you're going to give somebody a disability, it's got to come up. You know, it can't just be like, I'm blind. And then you just never address it again. And he's daredeviling about.
With his, it's like they only address it. And they're like, man, we need a complication for him. Oh, yeah, he does have that one thing.
Yeah. And I'm not saying it would have to be mentioned every time, but whatever. I'll wait to critique those fully when I get through it. And like maybe we could come back to this in a few months whenever I have made my way completely through it. My girlfriend will not let us binge it. That's why it's taking so long, whereas you did. Yeah. Because you were watching it by yourself. So I love Neil Patrick Harris.
Fantastic job in this episode.
I think it should have been, I don't think it should have been the Toy Maker. I think it should have been a different thing. I love they're bringing classic things back. I have my reasoning for this. It's got to be, I think they should do a dark villain that doesn't sing and dance. If they do a villain that sings and dances, that's the thing. I'm not saying they shouldn't. Let me rephrase that. I'm not against this. I love that whenever Buffy did like a full musical episode, the villain in that Buffy musical episode was great, but it wasn't based on a dour old like curmudgeon villain that then when they bring it back and all of a sudden he's like, people of the world, spice up your life. It feels like it's two different characters. I think it should have been something different from the Toy Maker or another Toy Maker, like a completely different one, but is basically the same like species or whatever. And then have him be like crazy and he's like everywhere, everything all at oncing people and dancing and throwing women into walls or shooting the laser at the doctor. Sure. And then totally like waiting for him to generate and it's like, take your time. I'll wait. I have the power of a god and no challenge has been made yet. So whatever happens, happens. Could have just shot them both again. I'm not advocating for the villain. I'm just saying, you stupid piece of shit. No, I'm kidding about all that. I love Neil Patrick Harris. I love Dr. Horrible's
sing-along blog.
Yes, and I watched, this might sound weird, but I used to do my math homework watching Doogie Howser on Wednesday nights. So I've watched this guy literally since he was a kid. I think we might both be close to the same age. Maybe he's a little younger than me. And he's also a magician. He loves magic, and that's why like those what few card moves he did on there were probably like holding back on what he could really do flourish wise with the cards there. So that's my only real critique. I didn't mind like what they did with him. I feel like it should have been bigger.
Yeah.
The puppet scene when there's a bunch of puppets, but when he has the doctor and Donna and he's going through what happened since he left Donna, that was powerful.
Yeah.
And his reaction to that, like, well, that's all right then. Oh my God, that gave me chills. It's like, you do not want to piss this man off. And he was trying to piss him off.
Yeah. I do think we should have seen more of him. Maybe done like 4 episodes instead of 3. Make that a 2-parter. You have the first 2 kind of setting up where we're going.
At least, yeah.
Final 2 be very impactful. But the decisions they did go with, I did enjoy. And I can see him being a little different just because, again, we're setting up this Ex Machina event with the middle episode. So, yeah, him even being back in the first place where he was previously banished before. And I can also see him like waiting on the doctor because he already does think he's smarter than the doctor. It's like, you beat me, you banished me, but here I am. What are you going to do? It's like, then I'll just beat you in the other game. So here we are.
Oh, one thing, then this is a tiny thing, but I felt like it was a Back to the Future reference when in the end of the second episode, which they're called Special 1, 2, and 3, but they have, and I've forgotten the name of the second one. The TARDIS is just a little off the ground in that like long hangar type base, and he's going toward Donna, and it's like he's kind of it's like a hoverboard.
Yeah.
And he's it felt like the end of Back to the Future Part 2. So I know that's tiny. I love a lot more of the show than it sounds like. I'm critiquing certain things hard, and I'm just saying the things that I would have liked to have seen better were that. Where do we go from here? David Tennant can come and go as he pleases now. And what I've heard from some other podcasts, I don't know if this is rumors or leaks or just speculation, but that Disney wants to do movies. Now, this isn't, I say that we don't really know, but this has been out there for a long time that American companies have wanted to do an American version of the Doctor, and it would be like what they did in the 90s, which would be a movie. Probably set in America or wherever, but who to be the Doctor. And once David left, a lot of people were like, they should do a movie, and just have him be in there, and it could be an untelevised event or some time displacement something. It's science fiction. They can do anything. Well, now he's just hanging out. He's canonically the 14th Doctor, still here. He can come and go as he pleases.
That could be Eccleston's back in.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this is almost like a closure. Eccleston is the first Doctor we see running away from the problems and just running towards the future, not stopping, never stop, always with that guilt. Then the 14th Doctor is the first Doctor we see starting to slow down, acknowledge that guilt, and then start to let it go. So to see those two in a movie, kind of bridging that back together, could be a very interesting story to
That would be
explore.
a wet dream of mine, to see Eccleston, not only Eccleston come back, but to see him with... I would settle for just an interview with David Tennant and Christopher Eccleston together, because Christopher Eccleston is way more open about Doctor Who now. He's doing events. He's doing, I think, audio.
Yeah, the radio shows.
He's making personal posts, holding up the magazine, pushing forward, saying like, watch Shooty Gawe, which you would never expect from him. He seems harsh. I don't know if it's that Northern England exposure to realities of life, but he's apparently a perfectly lovely man. I think he really did a great job of bringing Doctor Who back. And the only thing I don't like about his costume is the leather, but it worked for him. And there's something amazing that Moffat did. I don't want to, nobody tell Moffat that I said this. He's already got too big of an ego anyway. When they evolved the 8th Doctor in his audio adventures, they freshened up his look from what he was wearing in the movie. They cut his hair and they freshened up his look a little bit, made him a little more rugged, gave him a bag, like a messenger bag. So I was like, oh man, this outfit looks awesome. And then he regenerates into the War Doctor, and he pretty much just takes that bullet belt, I can't remember what they're like, a bow bandolier, yeah, and puts it on and just goes. And I imagine, it's like he doesn't regenerate for so long. He just lets himself get old. and just, I imagine, like, replaces pieces of the outfit as he goes. And it just looks like a more rugged, more worn out version of almost exactly what the Eighth Doctor just wore when he crashed on that planet. And then when he regenerates into the Ninth Doctor, he just basically changes clothes into a black version of what he was wearing with dark maroon and olive the sweater. He reverts back and forth. But on screen, it's dark enough that it looks black most of the time. So if you look at the three of these, even the four, like the two versions of the Eighth Doctor, Pomagon, the evolution of that, and then to the War Doctor, and then to the Ninth Doctor, it's like this seamless thing that it's not like the Ninth Doctor with his black and leather to the 10th Doctor's pinstripe suit. It's a pure evolution. And I love that he drew that line so perfectly. And it was all retrospective. Nothing about this was planned in it 20 years in advance. Moffat just found a way to make that work. Nobody tell him I said that. Okay? We have to keep that within us. The I have no title family. But yeah, I would love to see them sit down and even just let them have a conversation about Doctor Who. Just let them talk. It would be great to see them. I would like, one of my favorite things were the anniversary multi-Doctor stories. The 5 Doctors, I mean, they recast, that was the first time I think they recast William Hartnell. The 3 Doctors, I think, is his final on-screen appearance, and he only appears literally on screen. He's on a screen in the TARDIS kind of giving instructions to the other 2 Doctors because he was in such bad health at the time, but was able to come back and do it. And then in the 20th anniversary, they used an untelevised episode that didn't get finished until kind of recently. So they had some clips that no one had ever seen, never seen the light of day, and they just kind of shoehorned that in to give Tom Baker an appearance in the show. And then the rest of them, and I think maybe they used that was the one where they recast William Hartnell. But it worked. It worked okay, and I really wanted to see. Well, again, I got it. I got more than one Doctor on screen. What else? What else was good? I think I went too. I feel like I've come away sounding too negative about this.
I've softened on a lot of things actually, and I don't know if that's just my own headcanon, putting things together to make sense instead of going negative and just being like, yeah, it was shit. I'm trying to piece things together in my head so that it makes sense to me at least, so that I can move forward and not dwell on it.
Ah, yes. That's actually a healthy way to do things. I haven't gotten to that in my therapy yet. When I finish Capaldi, I have issues with some of that run, but he's the Doctor that reminds me more of myself, and that's what one thing, it's going to make me sound like an egotist, but you like somebody you can relate to, and it was like, wow, this is really like my Doctor. I wanted an older Doctor again. I was afraid they were just going to keep going younger and younger and pander to a younger audience, which I think is what they're doing now again. But anyway, I just want to keep mentioning I love Capaldi, and I think we said it on the other show, but hey guys, like, share, and subscribe, and give us Patreon money so we can get Capaldi on this show, and we'll ask him your questions. We'll get him talking about anything. Does he like Doctor Who? We don't know. I've never heard him say anything about it. Have him come on the show so we can interview him. That's my number one question.
Are we talking about Doctor Who in specific, or his time as the Doctor?
Oh, that's up to you.
So I was going to say, I'm pretty sure he said quite a bit about liking Doctor Who. He was the...
Don't tell him that! We have to get money so we can ask him! I was pretending not to know.
Yes.
He wrote that letter when he was a kid. I know.
I also have not heard of this letter and need Capaldi money.
Yes. So, Christmas goblins. We're getting them. Who knows where we're going to go from here? Especially with the 14th Doctor. And I don't mean to divert away, but I think the new Doctor is I specifically targeted for a new generation, new audience, maybe even a more American audience. I would hate to specifically think that, but the cross promotion with Disney and the look and feel, I mean, it really does seem that way. What they're going to do with the 14th Doctor, I think, is the bigger question.
Yeah.
I really do think that they could do a shorter run with the 15th Doctor, bring back the 14th Doctor to then somehow regenerate out a new 16th Doctor. I do not. Then we get complicated as hell with that. But they probably won't do that. I don't know.
Unless ratings are really starting to drop.
Well, they did, and we brought back, and they threw out a ton of money. I would have thrown out any amount of money to get Christopher Eccleston back on screen. To have, if we could have gotten that lineup, John Hurt died, sadly, but to have a full regeneration scene with Christopher Eccleston, spend some of that money to de-age him. It wouldn't take that much to do. I would love to see a first scene, or even just, it's him, but just don't show much of his face, and have him get into his clothes, stagger out, and do, I don't know. He apparently had a fair few adventures. Where was he? On a ship, and he stopped off. I'm still talking about the Ninth Doctor. Remember there's that scene where that guy's been chronicling specifically the Ninth Doctor. He doesn't talk about all the Doctors. It's like he has all this imagery with just the Ninth Doctor. So I guess he stopped off at JFK's assassination, was on some boat, and a few other places before he came and stopped the Auton from blowing up, whatever. It did explode, didn't it? So he saved Rose. Like, how long had he been just wandering about? Anyway, we can speculate endlessly on what they're gonna do. I think they're gonna do movies, though. I think they're gonna do. I hope they're good. These should have been that quality, though. It should have been an epic 3-parter, like what they did with Journey's End. Turn left, going into the Stolen Earth, going into Journey's End. That should have been what this felt like. Or when the Master came back, and it was Utopia going into The Sound of Drums, going into Last of the Time Lords. That was epic. This felt less epic to me. Having said that, there were a lot of elements in this that I really liked. I would have liked to have seen it. I know there was a lot of returning companions at the end of... I didn't hear about that. I don't know what happens or what gets said or whatever. So it would have maybe felt like... That kind of sucked because... And then they also did have some previous Doctors come back on screen. It would have felt like they're just doing that again, like essentially 2 episodes later. But there was part of me that was really hoping that they could have had more of a celebration and other companions. Nothing against Mel, but that was a weird pick. I still want something with Susan, which then you have to peg down, like, is she human or is she Time Lord? And there's always that conjecture, speculation. They've retconned this in either a book or an audio adventure or both. I think it was called An Earthly Child, a twist on words from the very first story called An Unearthly Child, where she was from Earth, but the Doctor took her, and I don't know. Anyway, that's something that just confirms she's a Time Lord, and that the Doctor gets to see her and has a better send-off from her, and there can be some resolution or closure with that. It might seem like you're going backwards as opposed to forwards, but that was what this was about, is confronting the past so that the Doctor can carry on in the future. They made him too powerful, but at the same time, I feel like they've also weakened him, maybe on an emotional level. I don't know that that's necessary, but it's, Doctor Who's like pizza. Yeah. Even when it's bad, it's still pizza. Have I said that before on this show about this? Yeah, I agree. Narratively, I get where they're coming from, why they had to do what they did. But I think just for an anniversary special, it should have been a little bit bigger. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Given that, it's Russell's back. I don't know what he's going to do, but he helmed the greatest revival of the greatest television show that there's ever been, and some of the best episodes that there have ever been were through his run, even if they, some of them were written by Moffat. Guys, don't tell him that. But he also wrote some amazing episodes himself and had some great ideas. And some of my favorite darker episodes were penned by Russell. I know that he loves the show. I know that he's maybe obsessed with the show. So we don't always see eye to eye on what should be done with the show, but I can't fault him for any of those things. Let's just hope it keeps going. And it's gonna have dips. Yeah. Everything does. I think it's a good place to wrap this up. In conclusion, go watch it anyway. And if you made it with us this far, thank you. Be sure to like and subscribe. We're going to take a little break, come back after the New Year's, give you guys plenty of time to watch Doctor Who in our absence. But be sure to subscribe, follow us on Facebook and Instagram so you know when we're coming back. And if you made it with us this far, thank you. Thank you to everyone that subscribed this year. And until next time, see ya.